for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to share just a little story about Jessica and her sister. They won many years ago the world's tallest Christmas stocking from Keeney Exxon. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to A, item 3A, receive a report on the most recent draft of the ordinance by Jason Loves, Development Service Director. Jason?
Can everybody hear me okay in the back? If you can't, just yell at me to shout louder. So today we're going to go over a couple of items very specific on the draft. This is not going to be an overview of the entire draft, but just some special areas of focus that we feel are most important and need some additional attention. So as we go through this, our first topic is going to be the R1 zoning districts. Specifically, we are going to discuss short-term rentals unoccupied. That is the definition of the STR that we will focus on that district. The current code does not allow those in the draft of 4, and it does not allow for any conditional use permits either. So we will discuss whether we want to allow them by right or by CUP. If it's by right, what are those locations? And then if it is a CUP, what are the locations and conditions on that? The R2 zoning districts will be our next topic. The focus on this will be the short-term rental unoccupied and the short-term rental facilities. Draft 4 currently allows those but prohibits them in the historic district. And so we want to talk about if we're going to allow these by right or conditional use permit. If that is by right, again, what are those locations? And then if it's by CUP, what are the locations and conditions? And then we're going to discuss historic districts, R1, STR, unoccupied. Again, it's going to be the same conversation, just this historic district is a little different compared to how it functions versus traditional R1 zoning. So we will be asking those same questions by right or CUP, whether it's, if it's by right, what are locations and again, conditions. So current draft 4 does not allow those in the historic district. Then we'll focus on the historic district for R2. Again, we'll be focusing on the unoccupied and the facilities. Again, by right or CUP. Again, in the historic district, they would be prohibited under draft 4. If we do CUPs, what are the conditions and locations? And then for the historic district on the STR facilities, we want to give a little special detailed attention to density, as that area is a little different than the rest of the R2 zoning you find in the city. Moving into the 5th topic, enforcement and penalties. So the current draft just states a kind of a 3 strikes and your permit is suspended for 90 days. So we want to talk about number of violations, types of violations, and if we want to consider some type of tiered system. And then we'll discuss suspension of permits, timeline, and possibly revocation of permits in that process. And then the next one would be conditional use permits. Once we kind of figure out what's going on in R1 and R2, when we have those conversations, this would be focused more on the evaluation criteria that P&Z and council will consider for approval, and possibly if there are any conditions that they would place on those for operation. Moving over to that, we'll kind of just touch briefly on a couple other short-term rental issues. The first would be vested rights according to Chapter 245 of the Local Government Code. And this would cover non-conforming uses, or most people refer to grandfathering. We'll also touch base on deed restrictions. This issue has come up a little bit for certain R1 subdivisions or residential subdivisions that have deed restrictions. We'll go through the different types and what those definitions may or may not mean in regards to permitting a short-term rental. And after that, we can talk next steps and kind of the proposed timeline. So other than that, Mayor, I'll turn that over to you and let you know if you have any questions for me.
I don't. Staff, council, P&Z, anyone else have a question on that short presentation by Jason? Okay, then we'll move to public comment. If I counted correctly, we have 32 folks who have signed up. That's good. I'm glad there's going to be that kind of input. I would like when you come up to the speaker, to the microphone, to say who you are, and if you're a city resident. You'll have 3 minutes. At the 1 minute mark, when time's almost up, you're going to hear a... Very well said, thank you. And then at the end of your time, you will hear a... Time, okay. And you may have to say a little loud so they hear that. Since there are 32 people speaking, if you go 3 minutes a pop, that's an hour and a half or more. Time for people to get up to the mic to speak. So I'm going to try, once he says time, if I feel you're halfway through one sentence and you're going to finish, I'll allow that. But if I feel you're going to continue on, it's not fair to the other presenters for their time to be not the 3 minute mark. So I'm going to call the names, and I apologize. Sometimes some of y'all's writing is very unique and hard sometimes to read. So if I mispronounced your name, please forgive me. And if I did, please, when you come to the mic, let us know how I didn't get it right. Our first speaker will be Ed Laughlin, and then Donna Middle, you will be on deck.
Thank you very much. I'm not Ed Laughlin. I live in Temple, Texas, but I do own a number of the smaller hotels here in Fredericksburg and also one STR on South Adams. Actually, since we have so many, I want to waive my time, and I'm going to just be here to observe and listen and learn today from everyone else. This is the first time I've been to one of these meetings. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Donna? And then Lance Branch is on deck. If you're on deck, if you don't mind to speed this up a little bit, if y'all would just either walk to this side or to this side to be a little closer to the microphone, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. My name is Donna Middle, and I've lived in Fredericksburg for 43 years. I owned Guest House Schmidt Reservation Service for 25 of those years. We are a B&B guest house rental agency, now called STRs. I understand that a few of our council are newer than B&Bs when they started, so I'm going to give you a little bit of history about how they did get started. Ken Knopp, I'm sure many of you remember him, he was the original person that started the B&Bs. His mother and his brother invited him to go to Germany and stay in a B&B, and he said, no, I'm not doing that. Well, he did. And he loved it, and that's the history. He came back, started a reservation service, started the B&Bs, and it's just grown from there. Our community is now known as mornings are not good for me. Our community has been known as the B&B capital of Texas, and our business was founded by Loretta Schmidt in 1985. In 1992, Dan and I bought the business, and we have been cataloging, I brought these up here, we've been cataloging the homes since 1988. And this is a lot of, we are doing history. This is history right here. All the homes are in it. This is how we did our business before the internet. We passed out these brochures, and thank you, Sharon. This is where, this is what people shopped from. And at that time, we did everything manually, too. There were no computers. Most of our homes in our service have usually been in the historic district. They are not suitable for family homes and have always been too expensive for families to purchase and remodel. Plus, historic homes require a tremendous amount of upkeep, which makes them perfect for STRs. Small footprints, little wear and tear, and constant upkeep. I invite you to look at these. I've got a whole bunch of them, if you'd like to. They're very interesting to see what's happened now and then. I would like for the council to reconsider allowing STRs in R1 and R2 in the historic district, where they've always been and used as STRs. I also urge you to consider correcting the zoning in the historic district before including any zoning restrictions in the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Lance, and then Jessica Middle, you're on deck.
Thank you, guys, for allowing me to address the council. As I think Tom said, my name is Lance Branch. Again, thank you for letting me allow you to speak to you today. I own along with with another couple and my wife, a commercially zoned property on Wellness Court. I know this can be a challenging task as you attempt to give us a roadmap to how STRs will be operated in Fredericksburg. As we shared with P&Z back in May 2021, when obtaining a condo conditional use permit, we were building a small complex on Wellness Court that we will use with our family and friends and intend to rent out to professionals and visitors staying in Fredericksburg, including STRs when we are not using it. This seems like a perfect model for STRs in Fredericksburg, as it doesn't affect any neighborhoods, doesn't increase prices of residential homes, and provides ample parking. However, under the current STR draft, we won't be able to realize our plans. Current STR draft legislation states all commercial property, including those not adjacent to residential property, which is my property, will be restricted to a maximum of 12 overnight occupants. Occupancy rules for commercial property change from current 200 square foot per person. The proposed STR condo and facility require parking spaces to be provided at a ratio of 60% of the permitted occupancy. Treating all commercially zoned property the same as residential unreasonably restricts the use of commercial zone property, which is available for a much broader range of use by its nature. Putting unreasonable limits on commercial property owners that don't affect residential properties will cause undue harm to the ability of property owners to use their property for what is a true commercial property. We ask that you consider removing the 12 occupancy max for commercial zone property, or at least commercial zone property not adjacent to residential. And then we also ask that you keep the current city requirement of 200 square feet per person of living area as is. And secondly, we would also ask allowing parking spaces to be provided at a ratio of 1 space per bedroom with tandem parking allowed. Again, thank you for your time and allowing me to address the council.
Thank you. Jessica, and then H.K. Sherrod, if I got that somewhat close. Jessica, please.
Okay. So hello, council, P&Z members, and city staff. Thank you for your time. My name is Jessica Middle. I am a city resident and was raised here. If you don't mind, I'm going to use the word guest house instead of STR, because that is what they have always been to us. Guest House Schmidt has been welcoming people into this community since 1985, as guests. And once they are our guests, I'm sure that many of the residents in this room were once our guests, and now they are our neighbors because they love the experience so much. I wanted to reiterate a few of the points that my mom made earlier. The history of B&Bs will tell you that STRs have always been in the historic district. Even when these houses were built, the district was never a typical neighborhood. These were Sunday houses, so STRs, basically, guest houses. STRs have always been a part of our community, fabric and heritage. We actually say that most of the homes in the district were once guest houses at one time. And Sherman Durst once said, he said, you know, when we run out of these historic homes, what are we gonna do? Where are these guests gonna go? Because literally, like I said, almost all of them have been at one time. And so that's one thing that I would like for you all to consider is that they evolve over time. I mean, so someone opens up their guest house in the historic district, but they don't stay guest houses. They rotate. You know, somebody decides that it's not for them anymore. They don't want to do it. And so what's going to happen is you're basically assigning that label and that permit to that house instead of houses organically changing from STRs to homes, back to STRs to homes. And so I just would like for you all to reconsider. I know that a lot of people are concerned about density in the historic district, which is definitely a concern. But I think there's other ways that, creative ways to accomplish what you're trying to do with density in the historic district. We all want to preserve our district. And, you know, we have the Historic Review Board as well that, you know, is carefully watching that. So, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. HK Sherrod. Okay, and then we have Roger Norman on deck.
Well, I don't have much to say right now, but I'd like to reserve my time for later if I do have something to say.
This is your time now, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Roger, and then we have Carmen Armstrong on deck.
Good morning, City Council and P&Z member. I'm Roger Norman, city resident of the Cross Mountain area. Air DNA indicates that there are a little more than 1,700 STRs in the Fredericksburg area, most of them in the city. 90% of these are whole house, non-occupied STRs. That's 20% of all the homes in Fredericksburg. 1 in 5 that are actually not homes, they're hotels, businesses operating in our neighborhoods. That means that statistically, if I were to look out my front window at the house across the street, the 2 houses beside it, and the houses right next to mine, one would be an STR. Now, some will argue these figures, but if you cut that number in half and add the houses directly behind me, I'm still likely to have an STR adjacent to my property. And by the way, I think Air DNA's 1,700 number is pretty credible. Why? Well, their business is focused on supporting the STR industry with accurate data for decision-making. They scrape data from over 100 million properties on VRBO and Airbnb in 120,000 global markets. They're widely known and used by the STR industry for their data. So their data seems pretty credible to me. Now, back to the impact of having 20% of the houses in our neighborhood STRs. What does that neighborhood look like? I don't think it looks like a healthy neighborhood. A healthy neighborhood is one where you are surrounded by neighbors you know, you count on, and you trust. Not a house full of 3-day weekend renters who you will never see again and who are not invested in the neighborhood they're staying in. I use the term business to describe STRs because in my mind, that's what they are. It even seems that the STR Alliance actually supports this when they highlight the hot tax revenue paid to the city, positive economic impact studies, the number of property management companies the STR industry supports. Residents in our neighborhoods, the ones that actually live in their homes, don't pay hot taxes, don't have professional property management companies managing their home, but hotels and other hospitality businesses do, right? I've said before that I'm pro-neighborhood, but I'm not anti-STR. I just don't think that STR should be in R1 neighborhoods. So what suggestions do I have for the City Council and P&Z to fix this? It starts with doing 3 things. 1, do not allow any new whole house, non-occupied STRs in R1 zone neighborhoods. 2, when a non-owner occupied STR is sold, the STR permit should not convey to the new owner. This will put a mechanism in place to return our R1 neighborhoods to their intended state without taking away any rights or permits from existing STR owners. 3, ensure that we have enough land designated for the STR industry, properly zoned for business use, so that STRs have a space to grow and thrive. Providing the STR industry with appropriate zone land is important to our city's future, and we should do it, but not in and at the expense of R1 neighborhoods. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Carmen? Mary Gallagher, you're on deck. Mary Gallagher on deck.
Hi, I'm Carmen Armstrong. I live in the Historical District. of Fredericksburg. I'd like to address the issue of conflict of interest concerning several active members of our governing bodies in relation to STRs. It is almost impossible with human nature to be impartial about making laws and regulations when you have a financial interest in the outcome. I would like it noted that Charlie Keeney is a realtor. Paula Rickert and Jeff Lawrence own STRs and are on the Planning and Zoning Committee. I would like to see the honorable action of recusal because I believe it is impossible to be impartial in this matter. Thank you.
Mary, and then we have Bill Schneider on deck.
Good morning. I'm Mary Gallagher. I live at 102 South Cherry. I speak for myself and for a lot of other people here. We all want to thank you for all y'all are doing to make some much-needed changes in order to get our Fredericksburg neighborhoods back on track and to rebuild a strong sense of community that having good neighbors fosters. Thank you, City Council members in particular, for considering at long last to acknowledge and incorporate at least part of the City Quality of Life Visioning Committee report. Frankly, those of us who worked long and hard on that thing never thought it would see the light of day, so we're grateful. On our wonderful Quality of Life Committee, among others, I worked closely with Randy Briley and came to consider Randy and Charlotte Briley family. I applaud Randy for starting the Fredericksburg STR Alliance because I believe a strong STR group will help inform the various STR owners how to be good citizens, how to avoid the worst STR complaints, which, as we all know, are excessive noise, light trespass, litter, trash cans on the street for days, and parking issues. Presumably, all of us in this room are capitalists, and as such, we understand and support people making and investing their money buying homes, starting businesses. However, these ventures cannot be at the risk of quality of life of anybody else. It's not fair. At this point, there's a lot of greed and entitlement apparent in the way things have swung. My late husband, Damon Brown, was a municipal bond broker, and his observation was that when the markets were volatile, such as they are here in the real estate market in Fredericksburg, that he observed a couple of things: fear, greed, and fear of not being greedy enough, and that should be food for thought. I've lived in more vibrant tourist communities than most, from Puerto Rico to Kauai, and that was by choice. I feel a good, balanced influx of tourists can lift a town and help it thrive. We know that. And of course, many of Fredericksburg's B&Bs and STRs add to a good experience for many tourists. However, balance in all things makes for a better life. And I'm pretty sure y'all see the balance is tipped toward investors and speculators and very heavily against us residents these days. Please revise the rules and help rebuild a healthy community with real neighborhoods, actual people in them. It would be great, again. There are plenty of STRs to go around. Let the new ones be in commercial zones. Please stop the neighborhood bleed. My hope and prayer is that y'all will turn the tide and help this community get its balance back, embracing the idea that we, the people, are all in it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, and then we have Linda McDonald on deck.
Good morning. My name is Bill Snyder. I live at 507 West Center Street. I'm a resident in an R1 area. My comments are specifically dealing with R1. R1 zoning is residential single-family housing. The state of Texas has made the decision to allow STRs to operate, for the time being, in R1 areas. So the city of Fredericksburg allows STRs in R1 areas. What has always amazed me is what kind of STR the city allows. I have what is described as a party house in my backyard. It sleeps 11 people, has a hot tub, fire pit, outdoor sound system, big screen TV, and a bar. It is an open-air pavilion with a roof and 3 open sides. It would be absolutely perfect in a commercial area of town. Needless to say, it gets noisy on occasions, as recently as last Sunday at 2:30 in the morning. I understand allowing STRs in R1 areas, but I can't understand why the city would allow a facility like that to be built in R1. It was a problem on opening day 7 years ago and remains to be a problem today. And I've lived in that house for 16 and a half years. And by the way, when I left the corporate world, I started a landscape maintenance business here in Fredericksburg and was supported by the B&B business. That's what we called it back in the day. So I have nothing against B&Bs. I think they're an integral part of Fredericksburg. As part of planning in R1 areas, is there any plan in place that could determine how many short-term rentals would be allowed in a particular neighborhood? My immediate neighborhood is 43%. That is 21 houses and 9 STRs. I bring this up because the Alliance Summit last Tuesday, which I attended, dealt with the issue of STR density. The gentleman speaking said if STR density was a problem, the city can decide on an acceptable level of STRs in R1 areas. He stated that it was important to create a good balance. I know many people in many parts of this city that have been negatively impacted with situations similar to mine. I'm looking at some of them. If planning does not have a plan in place to deal with the growing number of STRs being built in R1 areas, residents would suggest getting one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Melinda, and then we have Randy Burley on deck. Randy Riley, I'm sorry.
Good morning, council, P&Z members, city staff. Thank you for holding this today. I want to let you know the Alliance has read over 400 pages of drafts. We understand every section, every word, and we've read all of the other referenced documents that are woven together to truly create this new ordinance. These are all interlinked, so let's not confuse this. This is one document. These are all interlinked with a punitive punishment designed to create forced attrition of STRs with the city manager as the final judge and jury. Yes, municipalities across the country are grappling with STRs, and many are creating punitive STRs legislation. But what you may not know is that across the country, state legislatures and courts are overturning those decisions. As recently as last month, a Conway Superior Court, or a Carroll County Superior Court, overturned a Conway decision where the city of Conway had said that STRs do not fall under residential use and banned them in residential areas. The court ruled that STRs do fall under residential use and ordered the city to allow them in every residential area of their community. And yes, the state Supreme Court has ruled on STRs, and there's another case that's pending that will be, the result will be revealed by June of this year. Why put this community through a costly burden of punitive legislation that will ultimately result in court when all that's needed to be done is take a series of steps, work with the Alliance, help us professionalize our industry, set standards, do this in a phased approach.
1 minute.
This is like trying to cure a patient with a headache and using a sledgehammer. I ask you to truly look and delve into what is before you and do what's best for our entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy and Tammy Pack, you're on deck.
Good morning. I'm Randy Briley, and I am a resident of the town. And I want to sincerely thank Planning and Zoning, city staff, and the council for being here. Jason, in particular, for the amount of work that you've done on this ordinance. It's been extraordinary. And Clinton, thank you for your help as well. A couple things I want to point out specifically to the ordinance as it's written. Page 81 of the online version may not be the same as yours, but it talks about compliance and penalty provisions, and it talks about after 3 violations, the city shall suspend the short-term rental permit for a 90-day period. I would draw the analogy that if I borrow Tom's car, for example, and I head off down 290 at 120 miles an hour, I should get a ticket. Now, hopefully there's no officers in the room, but I'll probably deserve a ticket. That ticket should come to me as the operator of the vehicle. I would argue that any violation in a short-term rental should go to the individuals that are renting that property. That's the responsible thing to do. Transference of that guilt from one party to an unrelated second party, to me as a layperson, does not feel right. Permit suspension, it talks about if the owner may appeal notice of suspension or revocation under this section by filing a written appeal to the city manager. The clock starts when that hits the certified mail, and there's a 10-day window. If I'm traveling, or maybe I'm not in town, or whatever the case may be, I would argue that 10-day window may not be enough. I would ask that you consider expanding that 10-day window to perhaps 15 days to allow the owner to properly address that issue. Review and evaluation criteria, this is section 5.46, talks about planning and zoning and what planning and zoning can do prior to recommending anything to the city council. And there are 13 separate steps for consideration. Some of them are common sense. It's parking, it's, things, setbacks, stuff like that makes sense. There is one on item number 3, if you look at your packet. It talks about the request shall have no adverse effect on property within 600 feet of the affected property. I would argue, I'll talk faster. I would argue, what is the definition of adverse? Who sets that standard? If there's going to be criteria, make it measurable, defendable, and something that's clearly understood. Termination. This is section 6.110. It talks about non-conforming use of any property, voluntary discontinuation for a period of 90 days. I'm not clear, Jason, on what voluntary discontinuation is, so if you can talk about that. The way I read it is, if for some reason I'm not active for 90 days, my rights change, and now I'm under the new ordinance governing this body, whatever 2022 that we come forward with. Supreme Court right now is arguing a case fundamental to this, and it talks about, are buyers of real property able to rely upon the real covenants that are in force on the day that they buy that property, and what is the constitutional ramification if that is not held proper? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Randy, appreciate it. Tammy and then Leslie Spraggins, you're on deck.
Hi, I'm Tammy Pack, a 26-year resident of Fredericksburg, and this morning I put on my lawyer hat very briefly, something I do as infrequently as possible. But while I was getting ready, I was listening to oral arguments by the Texas Supreme Court, and they were very, very interesting. It's a case that has already been referenced. Those were argued on February 2nd. I looked up the median time it takes the Texas Supreme Court to give us a decision, and it's 83 days. We are that close to finding out what the Supreme Court thinks currently on these issues. Do the facts match up exactly? No, they never will. But every time the Supreme Court speaks and puts something to pen, we're going to know a whole lot more about where they're going with this. So my big question is, why the hurry? Well, I understand people want to see, changes take place, but I think we need to slow down and listen to what the courts say. Most importantly, I think someone else needs to pay for these lawsuits. Some of these suits that have made their way now there have been going on for 6 years. That is a tremendous burden on their taxpayers. They're this close to speaking. Are we really going to ram something through when, in what is that, about 60, 70 days, the Supreme Court's going to give us a whole lot more information? I wouldn't think so. One other thing, just as a side note, that I would point out, because we talk a lot about the historic district versus non, so I looked up I picked one town I like to visit as a tourist town, Savannah, Georgia, just to see what they allow. And I thought it was interesting, just y'all might look it up sometime, there, if you want to have an STR, a B&B, in the in a residential area, it has to be in the historic district or the trolley car or the Victoria district. That's where they have to be, because that's where people expect them. That's where tourists go. Do I want our historic district protected? Absolutely. You may or may not know, we at great hassle and expense are about to renovate the Keeneman House right in the middle of it all, and we'll probably have B&Bs on every corner. But to us, they're just other residents, other people wanting to enjoy our town. So look at some of these other tourist towns and don't compare us to towns that are not tourist towns. Waco's, Houston's, Dallas, Arlington's. These are not like us. And as Donna has so articulately pointed out, this is what we were before any of them heard of this. So yeah, we're different. I know we can get caught up in the fact that this is a big deal in the whole state and the whole world. It is, but most of those places, their economy wasn't built on this. 40 years ago, this was integral to our economy, and it still is today. So I think we should slow down before we ruin that and let the Supreme Court speak.
Thank you, Tammy. Leslie, and then we have Timothy Riley on deck.
Hey. Good morning, Council and P&Z. My name is Leslie Spraggins, and I'm a resident of Fredericksburg. I wanted to challenge the section in version 4 where if an STR owner receives 3 code violations in a calendar year, they'll lose their permit for 90 days. I believe that this proposed ordinance is unfair and is not equally applied to all owners. If a long-term rental owner has a problematic renter, they're allowed to continue to rent their property no matter how disrupted their tenant is to the neighborhood. A resident owner could cause disruptions to the neighborhood and receive code violations for his noise, his fire pit, his trash, his parking, his teenagers all over the place. So how is it fair or right to treat the owner of a short-term rental differently? Can a resident or a tenant not cause just as much upset as an STR? Why treat them differently unless the goal is to code enforce them out of STR permits? If version 4 passes and an STR receives 3 violations in a calendar year, they'll lose their permit for 90 days. I don't think anyone should lose their ability to use their property for a code violation. They should have a fine, a hefty one if you want, and the owner of the short-term rental or long-term rental or resident will not continue this same behavior with these hefty fines. This is the only appropriate penalty for violating a code, not losing the right to use your property. The city shouldn't be in the business of forbidding people this right. The fine of losing your permit is too stiff. An example would be if you had like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that was worth like $600,000, and this is an STR. It loses its permit for 90 days. Depending on the location of it and how nice it is and how much it's rented, you could lose $20,000 to $30,000 worth of income in that 90-day period. That would be the fine. This owner could not pay their mortgage, their taxes, their insurance, their employees would be laid off. They could incur penalties from online rental platforms if they cancel 90 days worth of reservations. They could lose their ability to rent on these platforms in the future. They would be very harmed. This 3 strikes and you're out will harm your own citizens. Over 50% own STRs, not like people think that we're not all from out of town. I realize you want an ordinance with teeth in it, and you've said that, but this is not the teeth we need. The Alliance has put forth best practices for STR. These could be used to build best practices in our own code. Every STR would be required to post the same rules online, the same rules in their home, and use it in all their literature. Every STR would have the same rules, like your pools and hot tubs have to close at 10 p.m. Outdoor lighting has to be shut off. This way, there's a code violation, and then the guests can be held accountable for their actions, not the owner. The owner would have the backing to evict them if needed, which they do not have now. The owner is not committing the offense and should not be responsible for the actions of another. Even the best manager can have a bad guest and in one weekend lose their permit and their livelihood. Please toss this 3 strikes and you're out proposal and use another approach that can be applied equally to short-term, long-term, and full-time residents, and that will put all of us on a level playing field.
Thank you, Leslie. Timothy, and then we have David Turpin. You're on deck.
Hello. Excuse me. Thank you. My name's Timothy Ellis Riley, and I am a city resident. Last week in the city council meeting, they passed the noise ordinance, and I appreciated some of the language surrounding that. I believe Mr. Lukenbach at one point, said, hey, or Mr. Keeney mentioned living document. Mr. Lukenbach mentioned, let's push it through, and we can change this. We don't know how to enforce these things. I mean, Mrs. Spraggins, she's always on point, and I would agree with a majority of the gray area. In terms of I guess it's the word fear that we have in terms of these 3 strikes, you're out. The one thing with the noise ordinance that was interesting, with all the numbers, the police reported about 170 or so infractions, and about 50 or so of those infractions were unfounded. You know, so almost half of the infractions that they went and investigated weren't even a problem. And that's where I sit in my comfort with any STR that I'm a part of, that these 3 violations, 3 strikes you're out, probably is not going to ever happen. You're probably never going to get in trouble for noise ordinance. It's very few. And then when that happens, how do we cross those bridges? And I think that's built into the CUP part of this game, and we're not going to know how to make those CUP regulations until we start to kick these ordinances down the line. And I really, you know, that was the unfortunate part about Avenue or, you know, farming some of these services out, is that, you know, when I'm in trouble, I don't like to be in trouble to an entity that I don't have a relationship with. And I would love the opportunity to be able to sit down and talk about, for some reason, if I was ever in violation, and then hopefully through that process there wouldn't be a problem. And I don't expect I would ever get 3 strikes, but I guess that's here's hoping.
1 minute.
So if we can refine it, make us feel more secure and how these violations might get handed down. I mean, STR owner, if they show up within an hour and they nip it in the bud, is no violation? So, you know, maybe we could write that. You know, give us something to stand on, so we're confident in all the many. I mean, the majority of every STR owner is going to go the extra mile to not cause a problem. I don't want to be in trouble, and I imagine majority of the people here don't want to be in trouble. So I see there's just fear built into this. Oh no, we're all going to start getting into trouble. So fight for the R1s. No unoccupied short-term rentals in R1s. We got to figure that out. We've got to figure out how to regulate that and enforce that. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. David, and then we have Rosemary Essison on deck.
Good morning, y'all. David Turpin here, 15-year resident. And first of all, I want to thank each one of y'all for serving. And I firmly believe y'all are only in those seats because of your genuine concern for our town. You sure aren't getting rich by being up there. So I believe, and y'all have heard me say, that we are living in the greatest town in America, that Fredericksburg is one of a kind in its culture, in community, and values. The 15 years my wife and I have been here, we've discovered true community, and that's why I'm here today. And I just want to remind us that we are all stewards of this extraordinary community. You know, as we frame the issue, I believe STRs themselves are not the problem, but the problem is the location, quantity, density of STRs. And I want to be clear, STRs are not terrible, but I believe in abundance of them in our residential neighborhoods. Why? Why not commercial zones? Or I would say, and some would disagree, why not in the county? But why in the residential neighborhoods? STRs, they do contribute to the local economy. And as has been pointed out here, they have contributed to the beautification of the city, which I'm grateful for. But we all know what also benefits Fredericksburg economically is people like us who live here. People like us who shop at H-E-B, get haircuts at Gold's, who get their teeth cleaned from Dr. Staling and purchase insurance at Beerswall. So as leaders, it's y'all's sacred duty to chart a path forward through all this confusion, to lead proactively, not just react. And I know you're hearing a lot of noise from people like myself and others, and I know it's not an easy job, but I know y'all are up for it. I do want to say, for those who are inclined to simply let the market work this out and let the market sort it out for us, we've got to learn from the example of Port Aransas. Port Aransas, now they're approaching 70% STR saturation, according to one of their council members. And if we do, I don't think we will, but if we do go down that road, we have to expect more and more outside money to pour in, displacing more and more residents. I think the proposed ordinance is pretty good, because I've come around to believing Jason that, you know what, maybe it's a good sign that none of us are enthusiastic about it. I think there's some wisdom there, Jason. And I would say that unless your livelihood depends on converting more homes into STRs, I don't think you should be scared of it. I think it's a reasonable compromise. But I do think that we should look to the example of Waco, and I was just dialoguing with their mayor, confirmed that to gradually restore balance to the residential neighborhoods, very gradually and very gently, they've stipulated as of last year that existing permits are grandfathered in, but they do not transfer upon sale of property. So just to be clear, that means that you or I, if we own an STR, we can operate it for 1 year or 50 years. But when I sell it, if it's in a residentially zoned area, it goes back to being a home. Anyway, I thank y'all for doing what's best for our community, and thank y'all for doing what's best for our children and our grandchildren. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Rosemary? And then we have Jason Kemp on deck. Rosemary, are you here?
She was.
Does anybody know where Miss Estenson? Jason? And then we have Tammy Smith on deck.
Excuse me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, Mayor, Council, members, P&Z, city staff. My name is Jason Kemp. I am not a resident yet, although that is our future plans. And I thank you for listening to me today. I urge you to grandfather those of us currently in the process before you vote on the new ordinance, and also consider a CUP or some other mechanism to address those properties that may be a better use as an STR based on its location and surrounding properties. My wife and I purchased a home in June 2021, and it is in an R1 area. Although there are 14 homes on our block, 8 of them are STRs. And those owners do stay there from time to time, but they do not live there full time. This home is also 2 blocks off of Main Street. This home will be our retirement home in a few years, but we plan to allow short-term rentals until we are able to move here. Shortly after our purchase, many ordinances were proposed impacting STRs. We have made adjustments to our designs numerous times, impacting our time frame for requesting a permit for our renovation and increasing costs. We understand there are community concerns about loud noise and rowdy behavior. We understand those concerns and plan to fully cooperate and follow any ordinances to curb this behavior. However, we ask that you take a reasonable approach to any measures. We respectfully request you to grandfather in those who have started the permit process, and to also consider a CUP or some other mechanism to address those properties that may be a better use as an STR based on its location or surrounding properties. We have to make a decision soon on whether to renovate our dilapidated house or forego our dream entirely and find a new retirement community and plan. Fredericksburg is where my wife and I were engaged 16 years ago this month. It's where our Sunday school class has its annual trip. It's where we spend many weekends a year with our kids. We love this community, and it's where we plan to retire. Please help us fulfill that dream. And we ask that you just make reasonable approaches to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, and then we have Jeff Warren on deck.
Hi, I'm Tammy Smith. I'm a 25-year resident of Fredericksburg, Texas, and I currently run Absolute Charm Vacation Rentals. A year ago, almost a year ago, we had the community and city and STR owner meetings. I went to every single one of them. We're still talking about the same 2 things. Affordable housing, we aren't going to change. Industry leaders have said it, realtors have said it. We need to spend time addressing workforce housing. Can you imagine if all of this time and energy over the past year was spent on workforce housing, where we could be and what we could have accomplished by now? The second is noise and parking. In the document that's before you today, there is no solutions, none. Solutions are with the people like myself, Jessica, Matt, Sarah, and many more that do this right. Solutions are with us. How? But has anybody asked us? No. We need house rules that everybody follows. This week, I had a guest who said, I'm renting this house, and I was like, okay, you're allowed 6 people in this house. I do believe occupancy is a huge issue as well. And they said, oh, we're going to have some more people over. We're going to have a birthday party. I said, I'm so sorry. You're not allowed to do that. And they said, okay, cancel. I said, cancel all your money back. They booked somewhere else, probably his neighbor. So we've got to come up with solutions. The new noise ordinance is not a solution to our problem because, as Jerry and Jason have told me, people don't call the police. And why should we waste the police time? Sorry, I got off track. One enforcement officer that leaves at 10 p.m. cannot do it. It's not going to be, it needs to be addressed before the guests come in. Like I said, house rules, occupancy. We need to be able to enforce our rules. You cannot, the city does not have the manpower to enforce what's currently there. You are trying to make it harder, yet it's not a solution. And we're setting the city up for failures. And the neighbors who are struggling with B&Bs beside them, no relief. Let's work together. I, as well as others, have plenty of ideas. So let's hire a security company. Let's have strict house rules. Let the STR owners pay for this, not the city. Let us, with the ideas, pay for it. The people who are doing it right, as Donna Middle has been doing it right since 1985. Let us monitor it. Let us get that out to the neighbors, a hotline, and then we have a security company, and again, address it before the guest checks in so that neighbor's not woken up. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey, and then Mo Sadi, you're on deck. Oh, you just stood up. Hope you didn't leave. Mo, you're up on deck.
Good morning. I'm Jeffrey Morin, a city resident. I wish to talk about data gathering and possible postponement of this ordinance. As an STR owner, we had some terrible experiences with the venue, which I addressed in a written comments to the city last year. Moving forward, I believe the city will be very satisfied with Granicus. The cost savings from $130,000 to $54,000 is a huge savings for the taxpayers of the city. Granicus will be able to tell us exactly how many STRs are in town. They can tell us how many STRs are in R1, R2, and in other zones. They have a 24/7 abilities to tell us who is violating our ordinances. As STR owners, we will have the ability to file our permit applications online and remit payments immediately. Far superior to the old chaotic system. We will be able to file our hot taxes online also. Basically, the city will not have to guess on what is happening in our town anymore. The city will have accurate data at their fingertips and available immediately. Noise, lighting violations should be taken care of expediently, and parking and trash also in a short manner. However, I have 2 items of concern. One, even with this new data, it will be easy to lose an STR permit. Latest version says 3 violations in 12 months, loss of a permit for 90 days. This basically puts an STR owner out of operation. An STR would have to cancel 90 days of reservations. Then Airbnb and VRBO would penalize and blackball that STR for canceling those reservations. It would be so easy to get 3 violations in a month, not to mention even a year. Violations from noise, lights, parking, trash, watering. So do you really want to shut down that citizen's right to operate? He might lose his mortgage or put him in a financial crisis. What if that same house was a long-term rental with the same issues and violations? That renter gets fined, and that's all. Do you see the legal implications that you are creating by doing this? As a taxpayer of this city, I don't want to pay for any more lawsuits. I personally suggest eliminating the 90-day loss of permit and increase the fine for violations. The only loss of permit would be if someone was caught operating illegally without an STR permit. My second item is a request. With all this new data the city will be receiving from Granicus, wouldn't it be appropriate thing to do to wait for 6 months to a year to impose this new ordinance? This would give you time to gather insightful and useful information on the STR community. The economic impact of STRs in Fredericksburg is immense, accounting for over 20% of its income. The city would already be enforcing the noise, trash, parking, lighting ordinances, which would protect all neighborhoods. I believe Granicus will be able to pinpoint STR violators, which will lead them to correcting their ways. I would like to request that we wait 6 months to a year in passing any new extreme STR ordinances without first analyzing the data to see what is actually happening. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Mo, and then Ken Carr, you're on deck.
Thank you. I'm Mo Saidi. I live in the city and specifically in Stonebridge. Normally, I don't talk about SDRs, honestly, because I don't own SDR. I'm not involved in that. And our subdivision primarily is deeded restriction that prohibits SDRs in our community. But in the course of conversations and what I'm hearing today, some things has come up that concerns us. And I do have some of the neighbors here, and we do have representatives from our Stonebridge development in attendance as well. So here is what my concern is. Given the language of SDRs, timeshares, BMBs, and so forth and so on, we were sitting back and thinking very much comfortable that we were covered. And in discussion with Mr. Lutz, it may be some loopholes in that language that we have to fix up and seal our language in our deed restriction with our homeowner association. That's on ours, and we will do that as a result of this process going on. On the other hand, I would like to suggest a simple solution to the city, and which would also give some of us who are living in a deeded restriction, deeded subdivisions, much more comfort, and it would also help the city for future decision making. And that is, every owner that comes in and files a request for STR to be granted, in that application, I think we ought to have a provision that says, is this property in a planned neighborhood enforced by HOA? Yes or no? If it is yes, it ought to state that the owner is obligated to provide a certified signed letter from HOA that would grant approval of the SDR before the city can proceed with the process. And that way, the city is, to some extent, is covered with any liability or wrongdoing. On the other hand, it forces the owner to come to HOA and ask for that pre-approval, and we are aware of what's going on. And if we do grant that, then shame on us. That's something that we have to work with our HOA. But I think that's a simple solution that would cover some of us in the subdivisions that are deeded, and it would prevent any future litigation in that process. So I really appreciate that you all consider that proposal, and that would be a wonderful thing to do. It's simple, it doesn't cost anything, and it's very straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Ken Carr, and then Sonia Rivera, you're on deck.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name's Ken Carr, and I live at 815 North Sherry. I don't think there's really an STR problem. I think the real clear problem is where you should have single-family homes in our community. Are we going to allow single-family home residential areas? At present, the entire city is zoned commercial in a practical sense. There really is not a single-family home zoned area in existence anymore. We are a commercial city at this moment, entirely. And I would call it commercial light in terms of the STRs. The result that we have is that everyone knows the damages to our community and our neighborhoods. Where are the children? We have become an investor honey hole. The solution has been stated already, so I won't go into that at great length, but we do need to have R1 without the STR. We only need to have, only owner occupants should be allowed to have STRs in R1. My final comment is, it's not about the money. It's about who lives here. It's about our neighborhoods. It's about the people. It's not just about money. The number of other STRs in zoning areas, in other zoning areas, will be so large that there will not be a diminishment of the income of the STR service business. I think you'll find that is a fallacy, that it will be damaged. Finally, speaking of lawsuits, if I were someone who had bought a home in 2010 in an R1 area, and suddenly I have many motels and whatever near me, I would be suing you to enforce the zoning of R1 upon which I relied. 40 years ago, we had neighborhoods, R1 zoning, and we had B&Bs. And that's where the Middles have talked about. They were innocuous, and many of them were owner-occupied. Today, that is not the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Sonia, and then we have Carol Hamerson on deck.
I'm Sonia Rivero, city resident. This whole process is not moving at a speedy rate. I have been with a few other people, Bill Snyder and a few of us have been talking to the city council for 8 years now, begging for interference to slow down the extreme proliferation of STRs. And now we are where we are now. We have so many STRs. I mean, as Bill said, just, over 40% of our neighborhood. And so it's certainly not, from my perspective, moving a very rapid rate. We have lost our neighborhood. That's what we are concerned about, and in fact, now it's a done deal. That is my primary principle, really, here, is to preserve neighborhood, as others have taken that same position. We do not have neighborhoods anymore. In my opinion, I live in a commercial district. I have hotels all around me, strange people coming and going all the time. It has really hurt. It's hurt Fredericksburg completely, because we used to have block parties and neighborhood gatherings, and it's gone now. It's completely finished because there are just not enough of us anymore, and there's strangers about. I did want to also point out, so I'm just saying that this has been going on forever, and we need to stop having new STRs. In my neighborhood, they are continuing. We've been talking here at this group for over a year now, and in this time, we have more STRs in my neighborhood. A couple of specific points I did want to bring up relative to the latest changes. One thing is that you're talking about, I want to make clear, I think that an owner-occupied house with either an accessory structure or something in their house that we used to call B&Bs, that those should be allowed without any additional kind of restrictions. I want to make that clear, even in R1 neighborhoods. So we are all supportive of that type of structure. It's the unoccupied houses that are a problem for us. You have a 10,000 square foot lot limit for somebody to have an accessory structure, and I disagree with that. I was thinking about my own lot is only, 8,000 square feet. I have a big garage. I could have an STR, unit on top of the garage if I wanted to, I guess, but not if you have a 10,000 square feet. So I'm saying I don't think it's reasonable to that. Even my small lot has plenty of room on top of the garage for a little unit, and I think that that should be allowed if as long as a person lives in the house. I also wanted to point out things like where you place hot tubs and whatever, that there's a noisy hot tub that's probably, it's several hundred feet away from my house, 300 feet something, and it's as loud to me as if it were next door. So telling somebody they have to move their hot tub, 6 feet, 10 feet, whatever, isn't going to make a whole lot of difference, because the noise, if people are making those kinds of noises, out partying in hot tubs, drinking and partying in hot tubs, that noise carries a substantial difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you
then we have, Emery Reed, you're on deck. Thank you.
My name is Carol Hammerson. I'm a resident, and I love owner-occupied STRs and B&Bs. I also attended, my husband and I attended the meeting out at the Edge by the Alliance Association, and I appreciate the openness that allow people to attend. They assembled a group of experts. and they are very interesting, and they had a lot of factual information, but they spoke with one vision and one point of view and one voice. And when asked the question about who should decide how many STRs is enough, they said, let the market decide. That isn't a good answer for neighborhoods in small towns. Now, the homeowners have no association. They have no group of people who are experts. Perhaps they could find people who would testify about the stress of constant noise every weekend at 2 to 3 in the morning. Traditionally in Fredericksburg, our wonderful little town, neighbors resolve conflicts with neighbors by sitting down, having a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, whatever you want, but listening to each other and having some empathy. When owners are removed from the problems that are created for their neighbors, I don't think that opportunity exists. So one of the things I would recommend based on training and personal experience is mediation. If you have 3 violations in a certain period of time, your neighbors report you, then I believe that the STR owner should pay for mediation, because you need to see the faces, you need to hear the stories, and you need to see the raw emotion that people have when they can't use their home the way they wanted to. So the question about why wait, why not go ahead and put these regulations in? People want to delay. We've been delaying. This has been a topic for years. And I know that the association is saying, give us the opportunity to create standards that will go across all of the members. That's great, but you cannot depend on the goodwill and sense of decency of strangers to do the right thing. There need to be teeth in this situation. You want to use your property for what you've purchased it for, and I understand that. But so do the neighbors, so do the homeowners. And they have one chance to live in this house. There are lots of places to have STRs that are not quite as burdensome on some of the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Emery, and then Emily Bear, you're next on deck.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here and for all your effort and time. And I would love to have some solutions put in place instead of constant conversations. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's how I feel. So I want to say thank you to the Alliance and everybody who came. Many of you were there yesterday at the summit. Was it yesterday? Day before? Day before. Okay. It's been a busy week. All right. So I got together with the owners of Guest House Schmidt and Absolute Charm, and we want to tackle and put a solution in place to the noise violation issue that does not cost the city money or time. And it's a creative solution. I need about 30, 45 more days, and we will have it for you. And I'm not going to spend my 3 minutes here going into a great deal of detail, but it is creative, and it puts the burden back on the property management companies and the owners. And SDRs are creative products. And that's why this has been so difficult to move the ball forward, because we need creative, data-based solutions. And I agree with the lady that spoke in front of me about needing teeth. The problem is you're putting the teeth on the wrong person. It needs to go back to the guest. I don't own my home that I live in. I'm a renter. And if I get a trash violation, it comes to me, not the owner of the home. That would be unfair. She has no control over where my trash goes. Okay? She has no control on how noisy my 4 children are. That's me. I live there, okay? I'm occupying the property. The person who is occupying the property needs to be held accountable. We can do that as a property management company. I need a little bit more than 3 minutes to tell you how that works. And so I'm just going to respect your time and mine and let you know there are solutions, and we're very, very close. So if you just give us some more time, I'm not talking about a year. I think that is a monstrous amount of time that y'all been talking about this. I haven't been here that long, so I'm sorry that it's taken that long, but we're very close to solutions. And my last ask is this: let's tackle one problem at a time, because if you try to put too much on your plate, you're not going to be able to enjoy the solution that you propose. It's not going to be good. And I'm going to leave you with the words of my father, because he's a lot wiser than me. Even if it's your favorite meal, if it's crammed down your throat, it's not going to taste good. So if we come up with solutions that are too hard, too fast, it's not going to feel good for residents. It's not going to feel good for code enforcement, and it's not going to feel good for your owners, who are also your community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, and then Milton Bucklew, you're on deck.
Hi, I'm Emily Baer. I'm a 14-year resident of Fredericksburg, and I appreciate you guys having this work session. So I wanted to bring up a couple of points which I've mentioned before in previous meetings. It is drastic action to take away someone's property rights. The right to rent has always been one of the 4 elements of right to private property. State law does not define a valid residential lease by any time frame. A rental of 5 days is as valid as one for 9 months. When you're talking about not allowing grandfathering to take place for someone that has an existing permit whenever they sell, that's taken away that property right. They purchased that home with the permit already in place for an STR, so not allowing them to transfer that, again, is a violation. I also wanted to mention the Fredericksburg Convention and Visitor Center sent out a beautiful email on February 2nd to experience romance in Fredericksburg. Where are they going to stay? We're still advertising for folks to come. The revision that we're on for number 4, over 100 pages, I still can't wrap my mind around that. I really think that we can focus on some solutions here. Here's 2 things that I think that we can do to give some relief for those that are for not having STRs in neighborhoods. Number 1, we can focus on enforcing our current ordinances. We have those already on the books. Let's start enforcing them. As far as violations, I agree. The property owner should not receive the violation. It should be whoever is creating that violation. I'm going to the Hyatt Regency this week for the Texas Realtors winter meeting. If I happen to get out of control and crazy, the Hyatt is not going to receive a ticket. I'm going to receive the ticket. It needs to be the same way with an STR. The other thing that I think that the city should do is to take the time and energy that we have invested in this particular issue and start focusing on attainable and affordable housing for our community, where the neighborhoods can be filled with children that are on bikes, and we can have block parties, and we can enjoy it. I really think that that should be our next focus, not this. Thank you.
Thank you. Milton? And then we have Jim Rader on deck.
Thanks, Council and P&Z members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. There's a lot of comments here. Man, this has been going on, which seems like forever, but we're making progress, and so it takes time to make progress, doesn't it? A couple of comments in response to some of the things I heard this morning. First of all, I believe that the suggestion that an intelligent, mature adult doesn't have the ability to be unbiased in decision-making is insulting. I think it questions their integrity, all right? And I think that what we've seen...
We'll stop the time for just a second, Milton, while people exit. Can we restart the time, please? Okay. Give him one more second to get out, Milton. Sorry about the interruption.
You bet. No, it's fine.
He wasn't feeling good.
Sir, I don't mean to be intrusive, but would you either please sit down or leave? Thank you. Okay, Milton. Thank you, Milton.
Thank you,
for your
Mayor.
patience.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
So my last comment was basically a challenge to think that our mayor and our P&Z members can't be unbiased. I think it questions their integrity, and that's kind of offensive to me. So I'd just like to state that. Where are the children? Well, the children, my 10-year-old is in the Oaks of Windcrest, riding his bicycle in the Oaks of Windcrest, where we have deed restrictions that prohibit STRs. They're in Stone Oak, where there are deed restrictions that prohibit STRs. That's where the children are. I think the idea that a young family with children are going to move on to Travis Street or Austin or San Antonio is illogical. They're not moving there. Those houses are already too expensive. They're going to remain expensive. And quite frankly, I would never let my child ride a bicycle on any of those streets. So I think it's a bit preposterous. I think one of the reasons that Jeffrey Moran proposed that we begin to take a step back on this is we have been talking about this for a while, but we're putting out solutions. Right? We're recommending things that can work. We like the idea of Granicus. We think it's a pretty good tool. Give it time to work. Right? Like anything else, we take one step and we watch how it works. Let's slow it down. Let's watch it work. And I think it will work. And I think we will learn that the idea is that all of these violations are so onerous, are really not quite as onerous as the attitudes against STRs are. All right, thank you. So I want to put one more. This is difficult. It's difficult to say, it's difficult to feel, but it's true. I'm just going to lay it on the table. And I respect everybody sitting up here. But this issue has been driven really hard by a couple of people who are not going to be here in a year. And they might be okay with leaving the rest of you with the bag of legal liability that's going to come flooding in here. And please don't hear that as a threat. It's reality. We're seeing it all over this state. We're seeing it all over the country. People sue, cases go up to the Supreme Court, and those cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for city to defend that. Taxpayers don't want it. I don't think you want it. Right? So I would consider that. Who's driving this and why? And then when they sail out, you're left with the bag. Got to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. Jim, and then we have Lori Yatsky on deck.
Hey, I'm Jim Rader, resident here. Just to preface my comments, I'll say that we own a guest house on premises that we use as a B&B sometimes. We're in the ETJ and it's fully registered, pay taxes on it. And then secondly, we're all hypocrites and sinners, and I'm chiefly among them. And I say that because I'm going to talk about the moral side of this, what I see as the moral issue. And I do think this boils down to a moral issue. And first, I think when it comes to morals, I think we got to think about integrity. And I hate seeing what this town is becoming. I love this town. We moved here for a reason, many reasons actually. But I see this kind of lawlessness, this partying. I know the police have left us now, it looks like, but I know they're working on it. But I got chased down recently by a road rage guy. I'm a victim of road rage, and it kind of impacted me a bit. I should have called the police immediately. I wish I had. But so integrity and character of this city, I'd like to talk about R1 zoning. I don't understand the integrity of R1 zoning when we let it go commercial. And that's what a B&B or STR is. All-site STR to me is a little hotel. So integrity of R1 housing, I'd like to bring that back. And then moving on to another issue in terms of morals, and that is affordable housing. You can say that these B&Bs or STRs are not affordable for people anyway, but there's a reason for that. STRs have helped drive up the price, along with regular supply and demand. They've helped drive up the price of all housing. And it has a ripple effect through the city, through the county, even beyond the county, because people that want to live here can't, so they have to live in Kerrville or even further away. So I'd like to help affordable housing by helping R1 housing bring it back. And then lastly, the integrity and moral character of that's really put forth by Jesus himself and loving others as you love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. I don't understand buying a house in a neighborhood and making it a B&B or STR, and all of a sudden, I mean, I just wouldn't do that to those neighbors in the neighborhood. To me, that's not the golden rule. So I think there's a big conflict there, and I'd like to I'd really like us to go ahead and change this and get back, bring this city back to its real self. It's still a real city, but I think we're letting it slip. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Lori, and then George Studer, you're on deck.
Hi, I'm Lori Yansky, and thank you for letting me speak. I have been a resident for 66 years, and a long, long time. And my dad and my great-grandfather, all from Fredericksburg. Anyway, we live on Cross Mountain Drive. I've had a B&B since 1999, and it's in a R1 neighborhood. We used to live right adjacent to it, and then we moved out into the country. Speaking of loving your neighbors, we love our neighbors. We know our neighbors. I've gotten to know all of our neighbors. One of my neighbors, he and I went to first grade together, and he helps me watch over the B&B. But we've had 2 complaints in 22 years. And I'm just afraid, like, the baby's going to be thrown out with the bathwater. I am a super host. I talk to all of my guests. They're lovely people. I have one out in the country. I'm a super host there. I mean, it's my livelihood. I love it. I've been a college professor. I make a hell of a lot more money doing that than teaching in a college. And if I lose that livelihood, what am I going to do? This is Daniel and my retirement. This is what we are counting on. And I have to say this. It sort of irritates me because I've been here a long time, and so has my family, that people that have come in think that they want to reinvent our town. When I was in college at UT, that was the push to start the tourism industry. And you could just see how this town has changed since that time. But you go west of Fredericksburg to some of those towns that are dying and awful, you can move there. It's cheap. But the vibrancy of this city and the future of this city has to do with tourism. And if you move here, don't be surprised. I am just saying that you have to be responsible as a STR owner. You have to know your neighbors. You have to let them know what you're doing, and you have to care about them. And I know that there are people that don't, but it's called responsibility. Letting STR owners know what is expected. I mean, it's just simple instead of making rules and punishment.
Thank you, Lori. George Studer, and then Mike Mahoney, you're on deck.
George Studer, Avenue D. And I want to tell you that Mary and I waited a long time to move into a neighborhood, work for the government in different places, and we found our spot on Avenue D across from Jerry Lukenbach to be a neighborhood. We walk the streets. We know the names of people. We are concerned about when issues happen, like there's sprinklers are going wrong, or we saw somebody strange by their house, they left their lights on, and we invite people over for lunch, for coffee. We stop and bring their mail to them. We're watching the mailbox. We know who comes to the mailbox. I know when Jerry leaves for work, or not, but our neighbors are all like that, except in the last 8 months, the guy down the street died and had to sell his house, and some of our neighbors wanted to buy that house, put down a reasonable amount, and tried to get on the front of the list. But the front of the list was somebody from Dallas who had about $100,000 more. And boom, it was gone. And the people who wanted to be our neighbors couldn't be our neighbors. And now the way that house is being reconstructed, and it's really improving, It's got 8-foot fences on either side. And it basically walling off this one half of our block from the other block, okay? The other neighborhood, so there's 3 B&Bs that moved in the last 6 months, okay? The other guy down the street, never see anybody there. It's like, you know, there's no one to talk to. If there was a problem there, you know, there's no one caring. It's empty most of the time, but on the weekends, you could have 8 cars there, and away they go. And they are not neighbors, okay? The third guy is a young couple. Wife's a teacher, young kids, and they are building a little B&B out back so they can afford to live there. We like them, and they're friendly, and I think they'll be good neighbors. So I think we ought to have owner-occupied B&Bs. We should zone appropriately so that the people who do have B&Bs are motivated to be more in the commercial areas. I think that the hot tax should be used to help neighborhoods.
Thank you, George. Mike, and then we have Jim Harris on deck.
Harris passes.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Harris passes.
Okay, thank you. Then Stephen Sachs would be on deck.
And Stephen Sachs passes.
Okay, so you're the last guy on deck.
Congratulations.
You're the end.
Cleaning up after the elephants.
There you go. Thank you.
Mayor, Councilman, Commissioners, I'm Mike Mahoney. I live in a home in an R1 area. I support draft number 4 as it's currently drafted and stands. Unlike some speakers, I think there should be no further stalling. There's always going to be future information that comes along that advises us, but we've been going on a long time, and it's time to enact a new ordinance. And it can be amended down the road as it needs to be, and it no doubt will. However, I do see there's an item on today's agenda to discuss adding a conditional use permit process to the R1 provisions that are currently in the draft ordinance. It would allow for homes in R1 potentially to be converted into STRs. If this approach is taken, I would not support the proposed ordinance. When citizens purchased homes in R1, they were entitled to reasonably rely on R1 single-family residential zoning, being just what it says, single-family residential housing. I don't see how anyone can reasonably claim that they purchased a home in an R1 area, our strictest zoning area, and that entitled them to run a commercial business there. If the city adopts an STR ordinance which provides for a cut process that expressly allows R1 homes to apply for STR rights, the city has taken away a property right that those R1 owners had when they bought that house. In effect, it'd be de facto zoning of every R1 single-family home in this town into an R2, where it could potentially be a commercial business. I definitely don't favor this, and I don't want to see my tax dollars wasted trying to defend against a likely winning lawsuit from R1 owners. If the city wants to rezone R1 neighborhoods into R2s and make them all B&B STR neighborhoods, do it. Sell all of our houses off and make housing for our tourists, but do it through an appropriate zoning process, not this backdoor and probably illegal effort to change zoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was the last speaker who had signed up, and with that being said, it's 11:30. Council or B&Z folks, do you all have any comments or staff would like to make? If not, we might want to entertain
Charlie?
a recess. Yes, Kathy?
Is this on?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's on.
Okay, I can't believe I have to say this, but Kent suggested I might do this. For those of you who have been interested in where I live, let me clarify. I live in the city of Fredericksburg. I bought my first house here in 2003. I've lived here ever since. I vote here ever since then. My car is registered here. My driver's license states my address on it in Fredericksburg. My dog knows all the cats on the block. If I didn't live here, I'd be in violation of the city charter, and I would not do that. So please understand, I am a resident of Fredericksburg, and please quit calling the city and bothering the city manager and the city attorney and whoever else you've been calling, asking whether I live here. I do. I hope that settles it. Please share that with your colleagues.
Thank you. With that being said, our Clinton Bailey is going to be helping us with this today. And Clinton, do you have anything to say at this time? If not, I will entertain a recess for at least an hour, maybe. We shall see. Go ahead.
I'll wait until we reconvene.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have around 11:30. I would like to reconvene would 12:30 be appropriate, an hour? Okay, is 12:30 good? Okay. With that being said, and I'm sorry, Janice, did you want to call your
Yeah, I never called it to order. I
Yeah,
guess I
please
should.
do. I missed that.
I'll call the planning and zoning meeting to order. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. I didn't want you to think
You might ought to move this
we're
one
orphans
up.
out there. Okay, so now we actually have planning and zoning on board. Thank you. I appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to do an hour off till 12:30. Y'all are all welcome to come back, and planning and zoning and council will be discussing all your comments. I'm sure we'll get good information from Jason as well in the facilitation of what we're hoping and attempting to do today. So everybody go have a good lunch, or if you want to hang around here, that's okay too. Thank you.
So you two 4A people, you got called out.